The pain in my chest wasn't from the cancer diagnosis. It was from the betrayal. I stared at the denial letter from the insurance company, my hands trembling as I read the words over and over again. Policy terminated. Effective 3 months ago. Termination requested by policyholder Clayton Thornfield, my husband of 40 years. There must be some mistake, I whispered to the empty kitchen of our Connecticut colonial home, the home we'd paid off 15 years ago when Clayton's accounting firm had its best year ever. The home where we'd raised our children, Quentin and Octavia. The home I'd lovingly maintained while Clayton built his career. I called the insurance company immediately, sitting perfectly straight at our kitchen table, the way my mother had taught me ladies should sit, even when their worlds were collapsing. The customer service representative confirmed what the letter stated. Clayton had indeed canceled my health insurance policy, just 2 weeks before my annual checkup, the checkup that had revealed the stage 2 breast cancer. I hung up the phone and stared out the window at our immaculate garden. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, pink petals occasionally drifting down in the spring breeze. I'd planted those trees 25 years ago. I would likely not see them bloom next year. Clayton came home at precisely 6:15 p.m., as he had every evening since his retirement 3 years ago. He still kept his accounting firm schedule, spending his days at his golf club or managing our investments at his home office. He hung his light jacket on the hook by the door and kissed my cheek absently, not noticing that I hadn't prepared dinner, as I usually did. I thought we might order in tonight, he said, loosening his collar. I'm in the mood for that Thai place. Not too spicy, though. My reflux has been acting up. I slid the insurance letter across the granite countertop toward him. Would you care to explain this? He glanced at it, and I watched his face carefully. There was a flash of something, guilt perhaps, before he composed himself. I was going to discuss this with you. It's part of our retirement streamlining. Streamlining? My voice was dangerously calm. You canceled my health insurance without telling me as part of streamlining? Now, Aggie, don't get worked up. I've been consolidating our expenses. Do you know how much we were paying for that premium? Nearly $200 a month for your policy alone. Highway robbery. He opened the refrigerator and took out a bottle of his favorite craft beer. Besides, we can always pay out of pocket if something comes up. We have the savings. I watched him twist off the cap and take a long drink. 40 years of marriage, and he still didn't know or care that I hated when he drank straight from the bottle. Something has come up, Clayton. I kept my voice steady. I have cancer. He choked mid-swallow, beer dribbling down his chin. He grabbed a paper towel, wiping his mouth. What? What are you talking about? Breast cancer. Stage 2. Dr. Mills found it during my checkup last week. I watched his face pale. The checkup that was scheduled 2 weeks after you canceled my insurance, without telling me. Jesus Christ, Aggie. He set the beer down hard on the counter. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. I need surgery, chemotherapy, radiation. Dr. Mills referred me to an oncologist, Dr. Lucinda Frost. I was supposed to see her tomorrow, but it seems I'll need to cancel that appointment. I folded my hands in my lap. Unless you'd like to pay the $500 consultation fee out of pocket. Clayton ran his hand through his silver hair I'd once loved to touch. Of course I'll pay it. This is terrible timing, but we'll figure it out. We have savings. Do we? I asked. Because I checked our joint account this afternoon. We have $23,000 in our checking account and about $70,000 in our emergency fund. Not nearly enough for cancer treatment without insurance. Clayton's expression shifted from concern to defensiveness. We have investments, Aggie. The retirement portfolio. Almost $1 million. In long-term investments that we'd face penalties for withdrawing early. And that's supposed to last us through our retirement. I took a deep breath. Why did you cancel my insurance, Clayton? The truth this time. He paced the kitchen, avoiding my eyes. It was costing too much. I've been concerned about our cash flow. The market hasn't been performing as well as expected. I thought we could save some money for a while, then reevaluate in a year or so. You made this decision about my health without consulting me. I make most of the financial decisions in this household, Aggie. I always have. The calm I'd been maintaining began to crack. Not decisions that put my life at risk. Don't be dramatic. How was I supposed to know you'd get cancer? You've always been healthy as a horse. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. I'm 63 years old, Clayton. Healthcare isn't optional at our age. He had the decency to look ashamed, but only briefly. We'll figure it out. I'll call the insurance company tomorrow, see if we can reinstate your policy. They won't cover a pre-existing condition. Not for at least a year. I had already asked this question during my call earlier. And I don't have a year. The reality of the situation seemed to finally hit him. Clayton sank onto a kitchen stool, his face ashen. What are we going to do? I don't know what you're going to do, I said quietly. But I know what I'm going to do. The next morning, while Clayton was at his weekly golf game with his retired colleagues, I visited our bank. Clayton had always handled our finances, but my name was on all the accounts. I had every legal right to access them. I'd like to transfer $800,000 from our joint investment account to a new account in my name only, I told the personal banker. Her eyes widened slightly, but she maintained her professional composure. Mrs. Thornfield, that's a substantial transfer. Are you sure you want to proceed? There may be penalties for early withdrawal from some of these investments. I'm aware of the penalties, I said calmly. And yes, I'm sure. 3 hours later, I had a new account at a different bank with $783,500, the amount after penalties. I had a new cell phone with a new number, and I had an appointment with Ramona Valdez, a lawyer recommended by my friend Winnie. Winnie had been livid when I told her what Clayton had done. We'd been friends since college, and she'd never liked Clayton. That miserly bastard! She'd fumed over the phone. Aggie, this is financial abuse. It's controlling, it's manipulative, and now it's endangering your life. I'd always defended Clayton to Winnie, making excuses for his controlling nature. He's just careful with money, I'd say. Or, he's looking out for our future. But there was no excuse for this. Not anymore. Ramona Valdez's office was modern and bright, with certificates covering one wall and family photos on her desk. She listened intently as I explained my situation, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. So you've transferred most of your joint savings to an account in your name, she summarized, and you want to know your legal options. Yes, I confirmed. I want to know if what I did was legal and what I should do next. Ramona leaned forward. Mrs. Thornfield, what you did falls into a gray area. As your name was on the joint accounts, you had the legal right to access those funds. However, in a divorce proceeding, if it comes to that, a judge might view this as an improper dissipation of marital assets. I'm using the money for medical treatment, I said firmly. Treatment I need because my husband canceled my health insurance without my knowledge. That will certainly help your case. Ramona tapped her pen against her notepad. Have you considered what you want your next steps to be? Do you want to remain married to Mr. Thornfield? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the immediate crisis that I hadn't fully processed the implications for my marriage. Did I want to stay married to a man who had potentially signed my death warrant to save some money? I don't know, I admitted. Right now, I just want to survive. That's a very reasonable priority, Ramona said with a gentle smile. Here's what I suggest. Secure your medical care first. Then we can discuss your options regarding your marriage. But protect yourself in the meantime. Change your passwords, secure your important documents, and maintain detailed records of all medical expenses. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of fear and determination. Clayton will be furious when he discovers what I've done. Probably, Ramona agreed. But your life is at stake. Sometimes we have to make difficult choices to protect ourselves. As I drove home, I thought about how Clayton would react when he discovered the money was gone. He'd be angry, beyond angry. But for the first time in our marriage, I didn't care about his anger. I didn't care about keeping the peace or maintaining appearances. Our colonial house came into view as I turned onto our street. It looked the same as it always had. Stately, well-maintained, picture-perfect, just like our marriage had appeared from the outside. But now I knew the truth. The foundation was rotten. Clayton's car wasn't in the driveway. He was probably still at the golf course, followed by drinks at the clubhouse. He wouldn't be home until dinner time. I had a few hours to pack. I hadn't decided yet if I was leaving permanently, but I needed space, somewhere safe to stay while I started my treatment and figured out my next steps. Winnie had already offered her guest room for as long as I needed it. As I packed a suitcase with clothes and essentials, I found myself lingering over photographs. Quentin's graduation, Octavia's wedding, family vacations when the children were young. Had we been happy then? Had I been happy? Or had I just been playing the role I thought I was supposed to play? The supportive wife? The devoted mother? The woman who had no needs of her own? I called Octavia first. My daughter had always been perceptive, sensitive to the undercurrents in our family dynamics. She answered on the second ring. "Mom? Is everything okay? You never call in the middle of the day." I told her everything. The cancer diagnosis, Clayton canceling my insurance, my decision to take the money. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Do you need me to come home? I can be there tomorrow." Tears sprang to my eyes. Octavia lived in Seattle, where she taught women's studies at the university. She had her own life, her own career, but she was ready to drop everything for me. "No, sweetheart, I'm going to stay with Winnie for now, but I may need you later, when I start treatment. Just say the word, Mom, I'll be there." She paused. "Have you told Quentin?" Quentin, my son who worshipped his father, who had followed in Clayton's footsteps, becoming an engineer but adopting Clayton's values, success, status, financial security above all else. "Not yet," I admitted. "I'm going to call him next." "Do you want me to tell him?" Octavia offered. He might not react well." "No, this is something I need to do myself." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, gathering my courage before calling my son. Quentin answered immediately. "Mom? What's up?" His voice was distracted. I could hear the sounds of his office in the background, phones ringing, keyboards clicking. I pictured him at his desk, probably annoyed at the interruption to his workday. I told him everything, just as I had told Octavia, but Quentin's reaction was very different. "You did what?" he demanded when I got to the part about transferring the money. "Mom, that's Dad's retirement fund too. You can't just take it." "I have cancer, Quentin," I said, my voice hardening. "Your father canceled my health insurance without telling me. What would you have me do? Die to protect his retirement? There has to be another way, Medicare or—" "I'm not old enough for Medicare. And even if I were, it wouldn't cover everything." I took a deep breath. "Quentin, I'm not asking for your permission or your approval. I'm telling you what's happening. I'll be staying with Winnie for a while. I have an oncologist appointment tomorrow. Dad's going to be devastated." I closed my eyes, counting to 10 silently. "I think your father will be more upset about the money than about my cancer diagnosis. But I guess we'll find out." I hung up, feeling drained, but oddly liberated. For decades, I had been the peacekeeper in the family, smoothing over conflicts, making everyone else comfortable at the expense of my own needs. Not anymore. By the time I heard Clayton's car in the driveway, I had moved my suitcase to the trunk of my car and was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. I had decided to tell him face to face what I had done. I wouldn't slink away like a thief in the night. I had nothing to be ashamed of. Clayton walked in, his golf clothes replaced by casual slacks and a polo shirt. He smelled of scotch and cigars. "Hey, Aggie, did you make dinner? I'm starving." "No, I didn't make dinner." I kept my voice even. "I've been busy today." He frowned, noticing my serious expression. "What's wrong? Is it about the cancer thing?" "Listen, I called the insurance company today. They won't reinstate the policy with coverage for pre-existing conditions, but I found a specialist who might see you at a discount if we pay cash." "A discount?" I repeated the word flatly. "For cancer treatment." Clayton sat down across from me. "We'll figure it out, Aggie. We always do." "I've already figured it out." I met his eyes steadily. "I've transferred $800,000 from our joint investment accounts to an account in my name only. I'll be using that money for my treatment." His face went blank with shock, then flushed dark red. "You what? You heard me. You can't do that. That's our retirement money. My money." "Our money," I corrected him. "And I already did it." Clayton stood up so quickly his chair tipped over backwards. "This is theft. I'll call the bank. I'll call the police." "Go ahead," I said calmly. "My name is on those accounts too. I had every legal right to access them. I built that nest egg. I managed those investments. I made all the money in this family." I stood up too, my calm finally breaking. "And I raised your children. I maintained your home. I supported your career. I cooked your meals and washed your clothes and entertained your clients. Don't you dare say you made all the money, Clayton. We built this life together, but you decided my life wasn't worth a health insurance premium. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. Was it fair to cancel my insurance without telling me? Was it fair to gamble with my life? Clayton's face contorted with rage and disbelief. You've lost your mind. Where are you going with my money? I'm staying with Winnie for a while. I have an oncologist appointment tomorrow. Dr. Frost is supposed to be one of the best. Of course she is, Clayton snarled. Only the best for you, while you bankrupt me. Any lingering doubt I had about my decision evaporated with those words. 40 years of marriage, and he was more concerned about money than about my survival. I'll be in touch about the treatment schedule, I said, picking up my purse and car keys. Don't try to access the new account. You won't be able to. As I walked to the door, Clayton called after me, his voice breaking. Aggie, wait. We can talk about this. We can find a compromise. I turned to look at him one last time. The man I had married. The father of my children. The man who had chosen money over my life. There is no compromise when it comes to survival, Clayton. You taught me that today. I closed the door behind me, got in my car, and drove away from the house I had called home for 35 years. I didn't cry. Not yet. There would be time for tears later. Right now, I had an appointment with Dr. Frost to prepare for. I had a battle to fight, and for the first time in decades, I was fighting for myself. Winnie's guest room was painted a soft blue, with white curtains that billowed in the evening breeze. It was nothing like the meticulously decorated spaces in my own home. This room had character. Books stacked on the nightstand, a slightly worn quilt on the bed, watercolor paintings by Winnie's grandchildren pinned to a corkboard. It felt more welcoming than any room in the house I'd left behind. You take as long as you need, Winnie said, setting down my suitcase. Mi casa es su casa, as they say. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the events of the day finally catching up with me. My hands trembled as I pressed them against my thighs. I did it, Winnie. I really did it. Yes, you did. She sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. And it's about damn time. The tears I'd been holding back all day finally came. 40 years of marriage ended in a single afternoon. Not because of the money, though that was the catalyst, but because of what the money represented. Clayton had shown me, in the clearest terms possible, that my life was worth less to him than the balance in our bank account. What if I'm wrong? I whispered. What if there was another way? Stop that right now. Winnie's voice was gentle but firm. He canceled your insurance without telling you, while you had cancer. What other way was there? I had no answer for that. There wasn't another way. Not one that guaranteed my survival. My phone buzzed. Clayton had called 17 times since I'd left the house 3 hours ago. I'd ignored every call. Now he was texting. Aggie, please come home. We can work this out. Followed by, I've talked to the bank. They say there's nothing they can do. How could you do this to me? To him. Even now, he was thinking of himself. I turned off the phone. You don't need that stress right now, Winnie said, taking the phone from my hand and placing it on the nightstand. Right now, you need to rest. Tomorrow is your big appointment with Dr. Frost. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I kept replaying the scene with Clayton in my mind, seeing the shock and rage on his face when I told him I'd taken the money. 40 years together, and I'd never stood up to him like that. I'd voiced disagreements, of course, but I'd always ultimately deferred to his judgment, especially about money. Clayton had always controlled our finances. He'd given me an allowance for household expenses, questioning every receipt, every purchase. We need to be careful, he'd say. We need to save for the future. Our future. The future that now might not include me, thanks to his penny pinching. The irony wasn't lost on me. Clayton had been so focused on securing our financial future that he'd jeopardized my chance of having any future at all. Morning came with the chirping of birds outside my window. For a moment, I forgot where I was, reaching instinctively for Clayton beside me. The empty space jolted me back to reality. I wasn't home. I might never go home again. Winnie drove me to my appointment with Dr. Frost. The oncologist's office was in a modern medical complex attached to Boston General Hospital. The waiting room was filled with people at various stages of treatment, some bald from chemotherapy, others appearing outwardly healthy, but with the same anxious look in their eyes that I saw in the mirror. Dr. Frost was younger than I expected, maybe in her early 40s, with a warm smile and direct manner that I appreciated immediately. Mrs. Thornfield, I've reviewed your scans and the biopsy results sent over by Dr. Mills, she said, pulling up images on her computer screen. You have stage 2 invasive ductal carcinoma. It's confined to the breast tissue, but there's a small possibility it may have reached some lymph nodes. We won't know for certain until we perform surgery. The clinical terminology made it seem almost abstract, as if she were discussing someone else's body. But this was my cancer, my body, my life hanging in the balance. What are my treatment options? I asked, proud of how steady my voice sounded. I recommend a lumpectomy, followed by radiation and possibly chemotherapy, depending on what we find during surgery. The good news is that your type of cancer typically responds well to treatment. With appropriate intervention, your 5-year survival rate is quite high, over 90%. 90%. Those were good odds. Better than I'd feared. How quickly can we start? I asked. I have an opening for surgery next Tuesday, Dr. Frost said. I normally wouldn't be able to schedule so quickly, but we had a cancellation. Would that work for you? 5 days. Less than a week to prepare mentally for surgery. But every day we waited was another day the cancer could spread. Yes, that works, I said. I'll need to make some arrangements, but I'll be ready. Dr. Frost's office manager discussed the financial aspects afterward. The estimated cost for surgery, hospital stay, and follow-up treatments would be approximately $175,000, possibly more, depending on the need for chemotherapy. I wrote a check for the initial deposit without flinching. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to ask permission to spend money. It was liberating and terrifying all at once. As we left the medical complex, Winnie squeezed my hand. First step done, you're on your way. Yes, I agreed. But to where? The question lingered as we drove back to Winnie's house. Where was I going? What would my life look like after treatment? Would I return to Clayton? To our marriage? The very thought made my stomach clench. I needed to talk to my children. Quentin had called several times, leaving increasingly angry voicemails about my theft of Dad's money. Octavia had texted her support, offering to fly out immediately if I needed her. I'd told her to wait until after the surgery. That evening, I finally turned my phone back on and called my son. He answered immediately. Mom, where are you? Dad is beside himself. I'm safe, Quentin. I'm staying with Winnie. You need to come home. You need to give the money back. Dad says you took everything. Not everything, I corrected. I left about $200,000 in the accounts. And no, I'm not coming home, and I'm not giving the money back. I'm having cancer surgery on Tuesday. There was a pause. Surgery? So soon? Cancer doesn't wait, Quentin. Neither can I. Dad says he'll contest this in court. He says what you did is illegal. I closed my eyes, counting to 10 silently. Your father canceled my health insurance without telling me. He put my life at risk to save money. Do you really think a judge will side with him? He says he didn't know you were sick. No, he didn't. But he knew I was 63 years old. He knew health care isn't optional at our age. He made a calculated decision that his money was more important than my health. Quentin was silent for a long moment. I don't know what to think, Mom. This isn't like you. You've always been so reasonable. I almost laughed at that. Reasonable. Yes, I had been. Too reasonable, too accommodating, too willing to put everyone else's needs above my own. People change when their survival is threatened, I said quietly. Tell your father that if he wants to contest this in court, he's welcome to try, but it will be very public, very ugly, and very expensive, and he'll lose. After I hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling slightly. I'd never spoken to my son that way before. I'd never threatened legal action against my husband. But cancer had changed the calculus of my life. Suddenly, the approval of others, even my own family, seemed far less important than it once had. Over the next few days, I prepared for surgery. Winnie drove me to pre-operative appointments. I signed forms, had blood drawn, underwent additional scans. I met with an anesthesiologist who explained the procedure in detail. Clayton sent flowers to Winnie's house, a lavish arrangement of lilies and roses that I knew must have cost several $100s. The card read simply, Please come home. We can work this out. I asked Winnie to donate the flowers to the hospital. The morning of the surgery arrived with a crisp autumn chill in the air. Winnie helped me pack a small overnight bag for the hospital. I'd be staying at least one night, possibly two, depending on my recovery. Octavia called, Winnie said as we drove to the hospital. Her flight lands at noon. I told her I'd pick her up and bring her straight to the hospital. Tears pricked at my eyes. Thank you for everything. Don't you dare thank me, Winnie said fiercely. This is what friends do. You'd do the same for me in a heartbeat. The hospital admission process was efficient, if somewhat impersonal. I changed into a gown, had an IV inserted, and waited. Dr. Frost stopped by to check on me before the procedure. Any questions before we get started? She asked. I had 1,000 questions, but none about the surgery. I wanted to know if I would live to see my grandchildren grow up, if I would ever feel safe again, if the hollow feeling in my chest, where love for Clayton had once resided, would ever be filled with something else. No questions, I said. I'm ready. The anesthesiologist administered the sedative, and I felt myself drifting. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was the thought, this is the first day of my new life. I woke in the recovery room, groggy and disoriented. A nurse noticed I was awake and came to check my vital signs. How did it go? I asked, my voice raspy from the breathing tube. Dr. Frost will be in to talk to you soon, she said with a professional smile that told me nothing. I drifted in and out of consciousness for what seemed like hours, but was probably only minutes. When I fully awoke again, Octavia was sitting beside my bed, her hand resting lightly on mine. Mom, she said, her voice thick with emotion. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck, I admitted. But I'm alive. Dr. Frost arrived soon after, her face serious, but not grave. Mrs. Thornfield, the surgery went well. We removed the tumor and a margin of surrounding tissue. I also removed 3 lymph nodes for biopsy, as we discussed. And? I prompted. The initial examination suggests the cancer may have spread to 1 lymph node, but we won't know for certain until the pathology report comes back in a few days. If it has spread, we'll want to proceed with chemotherapy in addition to radiation. I nodded, absorbing this information. Not the best news, but not the worst either. When can I go home? I asked, then realized I didn't know where home was anymore. Tomorrow, if your recovery continues as expected, Dr. Frost said. You'll need someone to stay with you for at least a few days. She'll be with me, Octavia said firmly. And I've taken a leave of absence from the university. I'll be staying for as long as Mom needs me. Dr. Frost nodded approvingly. Excellent. We'll discuss next steps tomorrow before discharge. After she left, I turned to my daughter. You didn't have to take a leave of absence. Yes, I did, Octavia said. And don't argue. It's already done. The department chair was extremely understanding. I squeezed her hand weakly. Thank you. Has Dad tried to contact you? She asked hesitantly. He sent flowers and numerous texts. I haven't responded. Octavia's expression hardened. Quentin called me, you know. He's furious with you for taking the money. He said Dad is consulting with lawyers. Let him, I said, surprising myself with how little I cared. I did what I had to do. I know, Mom, and I'm proud of you. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, admiration mixed with something else. Sadness, perhaps. I just wish it hadn't come to this. So do I whispered. That night in the hospital, I dreamed of my life with Clayton. Not the recent years, but the beginning, when we were young and in love, with our whole lives ahead of us. I'd been 23 when we married, fresh out of college with a teaching degree and dreams of making a difference in young lives. Clayton had been 25, ambitious and charming, already showing the financial acumen that would make him successful. Where had it all gone wrong? When had his ambition curdled into avarice? When had his charm become manipulation? Or had he always been this way, and I'd been too blinded by love to see it? I woke to these questions and no answers. Just the quiet beeping of hospital machines and the knowledge that whatever happened next, I wouldn't be the same woman who had entered this hospital. Surgery had removed more than just the cancer from my body. It had excised my willingness to be invisible, to be secondary in my own life. The next morning, Dr. Frost discharged me with prescriptions for pain medication and antibiotics, and strict instructions for wound care. Octavia wheeled me out to Winnie's waiting car, helping me inside with gentle hands. "I've set up the guest room for both of you," Winnie said as she drove. "Octavia can have the pull-out sofa in there. It's actually quite comfortable." "You don't have to host both of us," I protested weakly. "My house, my rules," Winnie replied with a grin, "and I'm enjoying having the company." Back at Winnie's, I settled into recovery with Octavia's attentive care. She changed my bandages, prepared my meals, and managed my medications with efficiency that reminded me of myself at her age. The thought brought both pride and a twinge of regret. Had I taught my daughter to put others first, as I had done for so many years? 3 days after the surgery, Quentin arrived unannounced at Winnie's door. I was resting in the guest room when I heard his voice in the living room, arguing with Octavia. "I need to see her," he insisted. "Dad is falling apart. This can't go on." "She's recovering from cancer surgery," Octavia shot back. "Dad's feelings are not the priority right now." "5 minutes," Quentin pleaded. "Just 5 minutes," I called out, my voice still weak. "It's okay, Octavia. Let him in." Quentin entered the bedroom hesitantly, as if he were approaching a stranger. In some ways, I suppose I was a stranger to him now. This new version of his mother who put herself first, who took what she needed without permission. "Mom," he said, his voice softening as he took in my appearance, the pallor of my skin, the bandages visible beneath my loose nightgown. "How are you feeling?" "I've been better," I admitted. "But I'm on the mend." He sat in the chair beside the bed, fidgeting with his car keys. "Dad wanted to come. I told him you probably wouldn't want to see him." "You were right about that." Quentin sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that it made my heart ache. "He's a mess, Mom. He doesn't know what to do without you. He's an adult. He'll figure it out. He says he's going to file for divorce if you don't return the money." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "He's threatening me with divorce after what he did? He didn't know you had cancer when he canceled the insurance." "Stop defending him, Quentin." My voice was sharper than I'd intended, but I couldn't hold back anymore. "Your father put money ahead of my well-being. He made a unilateral decision that could have cost me my life. Would you be defending him if I had died because I couldn't afford treatment?" Quentin had no answer for that. He stared at his hands, the weight of the question hanging between us. "I don't want to choose sides," he finally said. "Then don't. Just understand that I did what I had to do to survive." He nodded slowly. "The pathology results. Do you know yet?" "Tomorrow," I said. "Dr. Frost will call with the results tomorrow." Quentin stood, awkward and uncertain. Would it be okay if I came back tomorrow? To hear the results?" I studied my son's face. So like Clayton's in many ways, but with a softness around the eyes that was uniquely his own. Despite everything, he was still my child. Still part of me. "Yes," I said. "You can come back tomorrow." After he left, Octavia brought me a cup of tea. That went better than expected. "He's torn," I said. "He idolizes his father, but he loves me too. This is hard for him." "Harder than cancer surgery?" Octavia asked sarcastically. "Different kind of hard," I said, sipping the tea. "He'll figure it out eventually, or he won't. Either way, I can't make his choices for him." The next day, Dr. Frost called with the pathology results. The cancer had indeed spread to one lymph node, but not beyond. She recommended a course of chemotherapy followed by radiation to ensure all cancer cells were eradicated. "When do we start?" I asked. "I'd like to begin chemotherapy in 2 weeks, once your surgical site has healed sufficiently," she replied. "We'll do 6 rounds, 1 every 3 weeks. After that, daily radiation treatments for about 6 weeks. A 5-month treatment plan. 5 months of my life dedicated to fighting this disease. 5 months of uncertainty, of physical discomfort, of financial expenditure. I'll be ready," I said. Quentin arrived shortly after the call, as promised. I told him the news, watching his face pale slightly at the mention of chemotherapy. "That sounds intense," he said. "It is," I agreed, "but necessary." He hesitated, then asked, "How much will all this cost?" "About $250,000, including the surgery I've already had." Quentin let out a low whistle. "That's a lot of money." "Yes, it is. Money well spent on saving my life." He was quiet for a moment, contemplating. Dad got the bank statements yesterday. He saw the transfer. He's not doing well, Mom. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I was surprised to find I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish Clayton ill. I just couldn't prioritize his well-being over my own anymore. He wants to know if you're coming back after your treatment. The question hung in the air between us. Was I going back? Could I return to a marriage that had been revealed as fundamentally unequal, to a husband who valued money over my life? I don't know, I answered honestly. I need to focus on getting well first. Everything else is secondary right now. Quentin nodded, accepting this answer for the moment. I'll tell him. As he stood to leave, he paused, then bent down awkwardly to kiss my forehead. Get better, Mom. Whatever happens with you and Dad, just get better. After he left, I lay back against the pillows, exhausted by the conversation and the emotions it had stirred. The path ahead was clear in terms of my treatment: surgery, chemotherapy, radiation. But beyond that, everything was uncertain. Would I return to Clayton? To our beautiful colonial home with its cherry trees and manicured lawn? To the life I had built over 40 years? Or would I forge a new path, alone but free to make my own choices? To prioritize my own needs without guilt or permission? These questions would have to wait. For now, survival was my only priority. One day at a time, one treatment at a time, one breath at a time. The cherry trees at home would bloom again next spring. Whether I would be there to see them was a question for another day. Today, I was alive. Today, I was fighting. And for the first time in decades, I was fighting for myself. Chemotherapy is a particular kind of hell. The sterile hospital room, the clear liquid dripping into my veins, the nurses' practiced cheerfulness, none of it prepared me for what followed. The nausea that came in waves, the bone-deep fatigue that made even lifting my head from the pillow a monumental task, the way food lost all taste and appeal. And the hair, watching it come out in clumps in the shower, gathering it from my pillow each morning, until finally Octavia helped me shave what remained, her eyes filled with tears she tried to hide from me. "It'll grow back, Mom," she said, her voice artificially bright as she guided the electric razor over my scalp. "And until then, we'll get you some fabulous scarves, maybe even a wig." I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, a gaunt, pale woman with hollow eyes and a bare scalp. I barely recognized myself. Was this what Clayton would see if he visited? Was this why he hadn't tried to see me? Not even once in the 3 weeks since I'd left? Quentin had been by several times, always with news about his father. Clayton had consulted with 3 different lawyers, all of whom had given him the same advice. A legal battle would be expensive, public, and likely unsuccessful given the circumstances. He had put the house on the market, too big for just one person, Quentin explained, though I suspected it was more about punishing me than practicality. He had told friends and family that I had abandoned him, painting himself as the victim of my heartless betrayal. "He's rewriting history," I told Octavia as she helped me settle on the couch after my second chemo session. "Making himself the wronged party." "Let him," she said fiercely. "Anyone who knows you, really knows you, won't believe it for a second." But did anyone really know me? Had I even known myself before cancer stripped away the comfortable fictions of my life? The dutiful wife, the supportive mother, the woman who never made waves. That person seemed as foreign to me now as the bald stranger in the mirror. The second round of chemo hit me even harder than the first. The nausea was relentless, the fatigue overwhelming. I developed mouth sores that made eating painful. My white blood cell count dropped dangerously low, leaving me vulnerable to infection and forcing me into near isolation for a week. Through it all, Winnie and Octavia were my lifelines. Winnie read to me when my eyes were too tired to focus on the pages. Octavia researched anti-nausea remedies, prepared bland foods I could tolerate, and helped me to the bathroom when my legs were too weak to carry me. Between the second and third rounds of chemo, I received a letter from Clayton's lawyer. It was formally worded, coldly polite, proposing a division of assets that would require me to return half of the money I had taken. In exchange, Clayton would not contest the divorce. Divorce. The word stared up at me from the crisp white paper, at once shocking and inevitable. 40 years of marriage ended with a legal document and a financial arrangement. I handed the letter to Ramona Valdez during our next meeting. She read it quickly, her expression neutral. "This is actually quite reasonable given the circumstances," she said. "He's not going after all of the money, just half." "It's not reasonable at all," I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. "He canceled my health insurance without telling me. He put my life at risk. And now he wants half of the money I need for my treatment?" Ramona set the letter down on her desk. "Mrs. Thornfield, from a strictly legal standpoint, you are entitled to half of the marital assets, not all of them. The fact that you took more than your share could be problematic in court, regardless of the circumstances. So you think I should accept his offer?" "I think we should counter," she said. "Propose that you keep $500,000 for your medical expenses and ongoing care, and return the rest after your treatment is complete. That's still more than half of what you took, but it acknowledges his legal claim to a portion of the assets." I considered this. The initial surgery and first 2 rounds of chemo had already cost nearly $200,000. The remaining treatments, plus potential complications, follow-up care, and living expenses while I was unable to work, it would add up quickly. And what about after? Where would I live? How would I support myself? "I need to think about it," I said finally. "Of course," Ramona agreed. "But don't wait too long. This offer won't stay on the table indefinitely." Back at Winnie's, I shared the letter and Ramona's advice with her and Octavia. They had different reactions. "Take the deal," Winnie urged. "Get the divorce, move on with your life. Clayton doesn't deserve another minute of your time or energy." Octavia was more cautious. "Are you sure you want to divorce, Mom? I mean, I understand why you would, but it's a huge step." "Your father canceled my health insurance without telling me," I reminded her. "He put money ahead of my life. How do I come back from that?" "I don't know," she admitted. 40 years is a long time." "Yes," I agreed. "Too long to spend with someone who doesn't value your life." That night, alone in the guest room that had become my sanctuary, I allowed myself to imagine a future without Clayton. A small apartment of my own, perhaps. A part-time job once I recovered. Maybe tutoring or substitute teaching. Holidays with Octavia and her husband. Maybe even reconciliation with Quentin in time. It was a smaller life than the one I had planned with Clayton. A quieter life. But it would be mine, on my terms. No more walking on eggshells. No more deferring to someone else's financial decisions. No more pretending to be happy with less than I deserved. The next morning, I called Ramona and asked her to draft a counteroffer, as she had suggested. Keep $500,000, return the rest after my treatment was complete. It was fair, more than fair, given what Clayton had done. The 3rd round of chemotherapy was the worst yet. My body, already weakened by the previous treatments, rebelled violently against the toxic chemicals. I spent 2 days in the hospital with severe dehydration from vomiting. When I was finally released, I could barely walk from the car to Winnie's front door. "This can't go on," Octavia said, her voice tight with worry as she helped me into bed. "I'm going to talk to Dr. Frost about reducing your dosage." "No," I said firmly, despite my weakness. "No reductions. I need the full treatment to beat this." "Mom, it's killing you. The cancer will kill me faster." She had no argument for that. None of us did. This was the brutal arithmetic of cancer treatment. Poison yourself just enough to kill the disease without killing yourself in the process. Clayton's response to our counteroffer arrived a week later. He agreed to the terms, with one addition. He wanted to see me in person before signing any final agreement. "Absolutely not," Winnie said when I told her. "He's just trying to manipulate you. You're vulnerable right now." "I know," I said, "but I think I need to see him too. For closure, if nothing else." "Mom, you're in the middle of chemo," Octavia protested. "You don't need this stress right now." She was right, of course. But something in me needed to face Clayton, to see him one last time before we ended our marriage. Not to reconcile. That bridge was burned beyond repair. But to understand how we had come to this point. How 40 years of marriage had culminated in such betrayal. "I'll see him," I decided. "Here, at Winnie's. After my next chemo session, when I'm starting to feel better, but before the 5th round." Octavia and Winnie exchanged worried glances, but didn't argue further. They knew me well enough by now to recognize my resolved tone. I called Quentin myself to arrange the meeting. He sounded relieved. "Dad's been asking to see you for weeks," he said. "He has things he wants to say to you, face to face." "I'm sure he does," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Tell him next Thursday at 2 o'clock. At Winnie's house. He can come alone, or you can come with him if he prefers." "I'll come," Quentin said quickly, to support both of you." I wondered which of us he thought needed more support. His father, facing the wife who had taken his money, or his mother, bald and skeletal from chemotherapy. Perhaps both of us were equally pitiful in his eyes. The fourth round of chemo was marginally easier than the third, or perhaps I was simply becoming accustomed to the misery. Dr. Frost was pleased with my progress, though concerned about my weight loss. "You've lost nearly 20 pounds since we started treatment," she noted during my checkup. "That's too much, too quickly. You need protein and calories to help your body fight." "I try to eat," I said, "but everything tastes like metal, and my mouth is so sore." "Try smoothies with protein powder," she suggested, "or meal replacement shakes. Anything to get calories into you." I promised to try harder, though food was the last thing on my mind. The approaching meeting with Clayton occupied my thoughts almost exclusively. What would I say to him? What could he possibly say to me that would matter now? Thursday arrived with unseasonable warmth for late October. I spent the morning preparing myself mentally and physically for Clayton's visit. I showered, taking care with the central line in my chest. I rubbed lotion into my dry, papery skin. I chose my clothes carefully, loose black pants and a soft blue sweater that had been a gift from Octavia. I wrapped a patterned silk scarf around my bare head, arranging it to frame my face as flatteringly as possible. Not that there was much to flatter anymore. My face was gaunt, my skin sallow, my eyes sunken. Cancer and chemotherapy had stripped away any remnants of the attractive woman Clayton had married. I wondered if he would be shocked by my appearance. I wondered if I cared. Quentin arrived with Clayton at precisely 2 o'clock. My ex-husband-to-be had always been punctual, if nothing else. Winnie showed them into the living room where I waited, sitting in an armchair by the window. Octavia stood beside me, a silent sentinel. Clayton stopped short when he saw me, his eyes widening slightly before he controlled his expression. Had he expected me to look better? Worse? I couldn't tell. He looked older than I remembered, the lines around his mouth deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. 3 months apart had aged us both. "Aggie," he said, his voice softer than I expected. "Thank you for seeing me." I nodded but didn't speak. What was there to say? Thank you for coming? I wasn't thankful. I was simply doing what needed to be done to move forward. Quentin hovered awkwardly between us, looking from his father to me and back again. "Should we sit down?" he finally suggested. Everyone took seats, Clayton on the sofa, Quentin beside him, Octavia perched on the arm of my chair like a protective gargoyle. Winnie had tactfully retreated to the kitchen, though I knew she was listening from there. "You look," Clayton began, then trailed off, apparently unable to find an appropriate word for my appearance. "Like someone with cancer," I finished for him. "Yes, I know." He flinched slightly. "The treatment is going well? As well as can be expected. 2 more rounds of chemo, then radiation." He nodded, then looked down at his hands. I noticed he was still wearing his wedding ring. I had removed mine the day after I left. "I've agreed to your terms," he said after a moment. "You keep $500,000, return the rest after your treatment is complete. I think that's fair." "Fair," I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my sore mouth. "Yes, I suppose it is. Though fairness would have been telling me you were canceling my health insurance. Fairness would have been considering my life as valuable as your money." Clayton's jaw tightened. "I've admitted I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I didn't know you were sick." "You didn't know I would get cancer," I corrected. "But you knew I was 63 years old. You knew health care isn't optional at our age. You made a calculated decision, Clayton. My life wasn't worth $100-200 a month to you." "That's not true," he protested. "I was trying to be practical. Our portfolio wasn't performing as well as expected. I thought we needed to cut expenses. And my health insurance was the first thing to go. Not your golf club membership, not your weekly dinners with your friends, not your expensive scotch or your custom-tailored shirts. My health insurance." Clayton had no response to that. He looked to Quentin for support, but our son was staring at the floor, avoiding both our gazes. "I didn't come here to argue," Clayton said finally. "I came to tell you that I'm sorry. What I did was wrong, inexcusable, and I'm paying for it now." "Are you?" I asked, genuine curiosity in my voice. "How are you paying for it, Clayton?" "I've lost my wife, my home. I'm selling the house, as I'm sure Quentin told you. My reputation. Everyone knows what happened, what I did, and half of our retirement savings." He spread his hands. "I've lost everything that matters." "No," I said quietly. "You haven't lost everything. You still have your health. You still have your life. That's more than you were willing to guarantee me." The room fell silent. Even Octavia, who had been shifting restlessly beside me, stilled at my words. "I don't expect forgiveness," Clayton said after a long moment. "I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I understand what I did, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." I studied his face, looking for the man I had married, the man I had loved for 4 decades. He was there, somewhere behind the lines of age and regret, but he was a stranger to me now. We were strangers to each other. "I accept your apology," I said finally, "and I agree to the terms. $500,000 for me, the rest returned to you after my treatment is complete. Ramona will draw up the papers." Clayton nodded, relief visible on his face. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," I said. "This isn't a gift. It's what I need to survive." He flinched again, but nodded. "Of course." The conversation turned to practicalities after that. The house sale, division of personal property. Clayton had made an inventory of items he thought I might want. Family photos, my mother's china, my books and teaching materials. It was thoughtful, I had to admit. More thoughtful than he had been in years. "I can have everything boxed up and stored until you're better," he offered. "Or Quentin can bring specific items to you if there's anything you need now." "My winter clothes," I said, "and my jewelry box. Not that I have much occasion to wear jewelry these days, but there are pieces I'd like to have. Family pieces I want to give to Octavia." I saw the hurt flash across his face at the implication that I was preparing for the possibility of not surviving. But it was the truth. Despite Dr. Frost's optimism, I knew the statistics. I knew that cancer could return, that treatments could fail. I was planning for all contingencies. "I'll bring those things next week," Quentin promised. As they prepared to leave, Clayton hesitated, then asked, Would it be inappropriate if I called occasionally to check on your progress?" I considered this. Did I want ongoing communication with Clayton? Did I want him to witness my struggle, my suffering? Part of me wanted to shut him out completely, to deny him the comfort of knowing he was still connected to me in any way. But another part, the part that remembered 40 years of shared life, couldn't be quite so harsh. "You can call Quentin or Octavia for updates," I said. "They can let you know how I'm doing." He accepted this with a nod, though I could see he'd hoped for more. "Take care of yourself, Aggie. Please." "That's exactly what I'm doing," I replied, for the first time in a very long time. After they left, I felt drained, as if the brief conversation had depleted what little energy the chemotherapy had left me. Octavia helped me to bed, where I slept for nearly 3 hours. When I woke, Winnie was sitting beside my bed, reading a mystery novel. She set it down when she saw I was awake. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Tired, but lighter somehow." It was true. Seeing Clayton, speaking the harsh truths that had gone unspoken for months, had released something in me. Not forgiveness. I wasn't ready for that yet. Might never be. But a kind of acceptance. This was where we were now. This was the reality of our lives. "He looked terrible," Winnie observed with a hint of satisfaction. "Karma's a bitch." "He looked old," I said. "We both do." "You look like someone fighting for her life," Winnie corrected. "That's different from just looking old." I smiled faintly. "Always the loyal friend." "Always," she agreed. The next day I called Ramona and told her to proceed with the divorce settlement as agreed. No more negotiations, no more delays. It was time to move forward. The 5th round of chemotherapy was surprisingly manageable, perhaps because the emotional burden of facing Clayton had been lifted, or perhaps because my body was finally adapting to the treatment. I still felt awful, still struggled with nausea and fatigue, but it seemed somehow more bearable than before. "Doctor," Frost was pleased with my progress. "The tumor markers in your blood are decreasing," she reported during my checkup. "That's a very positive sign, and your white blood cell count is stabilizing. I think we're on the right track." On the right track. Such a simple phrase, but it filled me with a cautious hope I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. I might survive this. I might have a future beyond cancer. What would that future look like? The question occupied my thoughts during the long, quiet hours of recovery between treatments. I had been a wife for so long that I barely remembered how to be just myself. I had defined my life by my relationships: wife, mother, teacher. Who was I without those roles to anchor me? Octavia found me contemplating this question one afternoon as I sat by Winnie's living room window, watching the November rain streak the glass. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, sitting across from me. "I'm trying to remember who I was before I was Clayton's wife," I admitted. "Before I was your mother. It's harder than I expected." Octavia was quiet for a moment, considering. "I remember you used to paint," she said finally. "Watercolors. You had a small easel that you'd set up in the kitchen sometimes when Dad was at work. You'd paint while we did homework after school." I had almost forgotten that. Small, quick paintings, landscapes, still lifes, occasionally portraits of the children. Nothing special, nothing worth framing or showing. Just something I did for myself, for the joy of creating. "You were good," Octavia continued. "Really good. But you stopped when I was in high school. I never knew why." I knew why. Clayton had complained about the mess, about the time I wasted on a hobby that produced nothing of value. It hadn't seemed worth fighting about, so I had packed away my paints and brushes and focused on more practical pursuits. "Maybe I'll start again," I said, surprising myself with the thought. "After the treatments are done, when I have my own place." "Your own place," Octavia repeated. "So you're really not going back?" "No," I said with certainty. "I'm not going back. Not to Clayton, not to that life. I can't." She nodded, accepting this. "Where will you go?" "After, I mean." It was a question I'd been pondering myself. "I don't know yet. Somewhere smaller, more manageable, maybe an apartment in town, close to shops and cafes, somewhere I can walk to things when I'm feeling well enough." "You could come to Seattle," Octavia suggested hesitantly. "Brian and I have plenty of room, and there are excellent medical facilities for your follow-up care." The offer touched me deeply. My daughter, inviting me into her home, her life, but I shook my head. "Thank you, sweetheart, but I need to find my own way now, my own place in the world." She understood. Of course she did. Octavia had always been perceptive, always seen beyond the surface of things. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. We all will. All." Meaning Winnie, certainly. But would Quentin support whatever path I chose? Would he ever fully understand why I had to leave his father, why I couldn't go back? Time would tell. For now, I had one more round of chemotherapy to endure, then radiation. One more step on this journey that had begun with a betrayal and was leading me to, where? Independence, self-discovery, a life of my own making. The rain continued to streak the window, blurring the world outside. But inside, in my mind and heart, things were becoming clearer. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in decades, I was the one who would decide it. Not Clayton, not cancer, me. Winter melted into spring, and spring blossomed into summer. My final chemotherapy treatment was in December, followed by 6 weeks of daily radiation therapy that left my skin burned and raw, but killed the last vestiges of cancer in my body. By March, Dr. Frost declared me in remission. Not cured, that word wouldn't be used for at least 5 years, if ever, but in remission. The cancer was gone, for now at least. "Your prognosis is excellent," she told me during my follow-up appointment. "The treatments were aggressive, but effective. You still need regular checkups, of course, but there's no reason you can't resume a normal life." Normal. The word meant something different to me now. My old normal was gone. The spacious colonial house, the 40-year marriage, the comfortable routine of a life built around someone else's needs. My new normal was still taking shape. I had found a small apartment in a renovated Victorian house near the center of town. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a living room with large windows that flooded the space with light. It was nothing like the home I had shared with Clayton, and that was precisely why I loved it. I had furnished it sparsely with a few pieces from our old house. My reading chair, some bookshelves, the antique desk that had been my grandmother's, and new items I had chosen myself, without considering anyone else's taste or preferences. The divorce was finalized in January. As agreed, I kept $500,000 and returned the remainder to Clayton after my treatment was complete. It was less than I had originally taken, but enough to pay my medical bills and provide a modest income when combined with my teacher's pension. I would never be wealthy, but I would be secure, independent. Clayton had sold our house and moved to a condominium near his golf club. According to Quentin, he had joined a widowers and divorcees social group and was dating a woman he'd met there, a 60-year-old retired nurse named Barbara. I felt no jealousy when I heard this, only a mild curiosity and, surprisingly, a flicker of relief. Clayton wouldn't be alone, neither would I. My hair had begun to grow back, short and surprisingly soft, with more gray than I remembered. I decided not to dye it. The silver strands were badges of survival, of endurance. I had earned everyone. Octavia had returned to Seattle and her teaching position, though she called almost daily and had made me promise to visit in the summer. Quentin remained more distant, still struggling to reconcile his loyalty to his father with his love for me. He called weekly, his conversations polite but reserved. Time would heal that rift, I hoped. Or not. I had learned to accept that some things were beyond my control. What was within my control was how I lived now, the choices I made, the boundaries I set, the priorities I established. No more subjugating my needs to someone else's. No more silencing my voice to keep the peace. No more diminishing myself to make others comfortable. In April, I bought new watercolor paints, brushes, and paper. I set up a small easel by the window in my apartment and began to paint again. Hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. The results were amateurish after so many years without practice, but it didn't matter. The joy was in the doing, not the outcome. I had just finished a small landscape of the park across from my apartment when my phone rang. Clayton's name appeared on the screen. He had called occasionally during my treatment, always speaking to Octavia or Quentin, never directly to me. This was the first time he had called my new number, which I had only recently shared with the children. For a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won out. I answered, "Hello, Clayton. Aggie." His voice sounded strained, different. "Thank you for picking up. I wasn't sure you would. What can I do for you?" I kept my tone neutral, neither warm nor cold. "I've been to the doctor," he said, without preamble. "I have an aneurysm. In my brain. It's not good." The news hit me with unexpected force. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the pain and the divorce, I had shared 40 years of my life with this man. I had loved him once. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. "What are the treatment options?" "Surgery, expensive surgery." But he paused, and I could hear him struggling to control his voice. "My insurance won't cover it. It's considered experimental for someone my age." The irony was not lost on either of us. Clayton, denied medical treatment because of insurance restrictions. Clayton, facing mortality without the financial resources he needed to save his life. "I see," I said carefully. "And you're calling me because—" "I need help, Aggie." The words seemed to cost him physically to say. "The procedure costs $350,000. I have about $200,000 liquid after the divorce and house sale. The rest is tied up in investments I can't access quickly enough. The doctors say I don't have much time to decide." I closed my eyes, absorbing this. Clayton was asking me for money. Money to save his life, just as I had needed money to save mine. The symmetry was almost too perfect, too poetic in its justice. "You're asking me to give you $150,000. Not give," he corrected quickly. "Loan. I'll pay it back as soon as I can access my investments. With interest." Just as he had suggested I could pay cash for my cancer treatment, as if it were a simple matter of temporarily adjusting our budget. "What happens if you don't have the surgery?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The aneurysm could rupture at any time. If it does—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I looked around my small apartment, at the painting I had just completed, at the life I was rebuilding from the ashes of the old one. I had survived. I had just over $300,000 left from the divorce settlement after paying my medical bills. I could give Clayton what he was asking for and still have enough to live on, especially with my pension. But should I? After what he had done? After he had valued money over my life? I need to think about this, I said finally. I'll call you tomorrow. I hung up before he could respond, before he could press his case or express his gratitude for even considering his request. I needed space to think, to process, to decide. I called Winnie first. My loyal friend had no doubts about what I should do. Let him reap what he sowed, she said firmly. He made his choice when he canceled your insurance. Now he can live, or not, with the consequences. Octavia was more conflicted when I called her. It's not about whether he deserves your help, she said thoughtfully. It's about who you want to be. Can you live with yourself if you refuse, and he dies? Could I? That was the question that kept me awake that night. Not whether Clayton deserved my help, he didn't by any objective measure, but whether I could reconcile refusing with the person I wanted to be. Not the person I had been before cancer, the accommodating wife, the self-effacing mother, but the person I was becoming. The person who had survived, who was learning to put herself first without becoming selfish, who was finding her voice without becoming harsh. In the morning, I called Clayton. I've thought about your request, I said when he answered. I'll help you on one condition. Anything, he said quickly. Too quickly. The old Clayton would never have agreed to conditions without hearing them first. Fear had changed him, just as it had changed me. I'll pay for half of the procedure, $175,000. You'll need to find the rest yourself. Sell your condo, liquidate some investments early, whatever it takes. I'm not giving you the money. I'm matching what you can put together yourself. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, why? After what I did to you, why would you help me at all? It was a fair question. One I had asked myself repeatedly during the night. Because I don't want to be the person who does to you what you did to me, I said simply. I don't want to be the person who puts money ahead of a life, even yours. Another silence. Thank you, Aggie. Don't thank me yet. You still need to come up with your half. I will, he promised. I'll sell everything if I have to. Just as I would have done, had I not taken matters into my own hands. After we hung up, I went to the window and looked out at the park across the street. The cherry trees there were in full bloom, just like the ones at my old home. Life continuing, renewing, persisting despite everything. I had survived. Clayton might survive too, with my help, or he might not, even with the surgery. None of us knows how much time we have, only what we do with the time we're given. I set up my easel and began a new painting, the cherry blossoms against the clear blue April sky. I was no longer painting for Clayton, or for anyone else. I was painting for myself, for the joy of creating, for the pleasure of seeing the world through my own eyes and interpreting it in my own way. This was my life now, imperfect, uncertain, but mine. My choices, my priorities, my voice. After 63 years, I had finally learned the most important lesson. My life had value, not because of what I did for others, but simply because it was mine. If you're watching this and struggling to stand up for yourself, remember that your life has value too. You deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be prioritized, especially by those who claim to love you. And if you found strength in my story, please hit that subscribe button and share this video. Your support means everything as I continue to share these journeys of resilience and self-discovery.